Good morning, Carol Johnson,
Good morning, Bob Ponce.
and we are here. It's a year later since the first shutdown, and we're still talking about COVID-19.
Well, we're going to be talking about that for quite some time. You
So
know,
for today, I decided to go back to what we were doing in the early days about a year ago, and just look at the maps, look at the data. I think one of the things we've been talking about consistently is how the neighborhoods that have been most affected by this pandemic have continued to get the least amount of resources. And while the narrative and conversation seems to be about, oh, we've got vaccines out and it's working and we're on the backside of this, when we look at the data, our neighborhoods are still in the middle of the pandemic, and it doesn't look good. So let's look at some maps and talk about three different things. So here is a map of areas with the most hospitalization, and all you have to do is look at the areas that are darkest to understand these are the areas where there's the most problems. So as we look once again in East Harlem, uh, dark, we see the highest rates. We see the same thing happening in all these different areas of the Bronx, and the rest of the city seems to be a lot calmer. Even Staten Island, which months ago was really bad, they seem to have their problems seem to have subsided, and the ones in East Harlem, Upper Manhattan, and the Bronx, we're still dealing with the highest levels of hospitalization. And then here's a second map. Here's the level of deaths. And once again, we see the dark areas in East Harlem. We see the darker areas going up in Upper Manhattan, and we see the darkest areas in the Bronx. Now, the third map that we're going to look at is the other shadow pandemic, which is the eviction pandemic. So here is a screenshot of the map where the people who are most at risk for eviction, starting on May 1st, when a lot of the eviction protections run out. And what once again do we see the same dark areas in Upper Manhattan and the Bronx?
we're talking about forcible evictions.
Hmm.
You Not just putting something on your door and, what they used to do, 3-day notices. You
Hmm.
know, that's talking about marshals showing up at your home. They're forcing
Hmm.
you out. Somebody's coming to take you out. You're not just being asked to leave,
Hmm.
you're actually being forced out. And a lot of these people already had cases, which a lot of those cases ceased because the court situation has never returned to, full capacity.
Hmm.
So there's like hundreds of thousands of people that's facing this situation in the city. And still, so many people that were working that lost their jobs. Is a lady that's mentioned in the article that was working but didn't qualify for unemployment because she was getting paid in cash working in a restaurant.
Hmm.
You know, so it's like really, really bleak that even though so many people are getting ready to like starting to celebrate that we're on the other side of this, now we're going to really see COVID's devastation.
Hmm. Absolutely. And there still has been very, very little talk about what's happening in terms of people who are recovering from COVID and long-term effects. But that's a whole nother story. Right now, we're just dealing with people who are still dealing with the worst of the effects of the pandemic, which
Yeah,
is
I mean, $1,400 is not going to bail somebody out when they're like $4,000 in debt.
mhm,
So I don't know. I guess with this stimulus package, took so long to get to this one. I doubt if there's another one coming. If it is, it's coming so far down the pike,
mhm,
and it wouldn't help these people that are in this situation now.
right. And there's nothing coming from the federal government in terms of rent protections, it seems. And what's happening on the city and state level, I'm not seeing it either. So,
It's like, well, that seems to be the attitude. Like, well,
mhm,
I mean, hey, these things happen. What do you
mhm,
want to do? These things don't just happen. This is not a natural occurrence. This is something that, I mean, is anybody that I'm sure there's maybe a few people that's alive that were alive during the Spanish flu, not the Spanish flu, the flu epidemic in 1917.
right.
So, but the rest of us have never seen anything like this.
Mhm,
So to say that it's something that's happening and we're working to get it straight, it just goes to show just how not only unprepared we are, or we were and still are, but how little was being done in the
mhm,
very beginning. That when you look at something like this, a public health emergency, the same way we look at the seven survival techniques of the houses of worship,
mhm,
these were the same things they were supposed to be thinking about.
mhm,
You know, we had that covered, and we were just talking about houses of worship. But if you
mhm,
had expanded that, because everything was covered there,
mhm,
you know? And so if the state officials had just looked at that, these are the things that are going to affect people during this pandemic. Yes,
mhm,
we got to try to bring down the spread. We know we got to try to cease hospitalizations. But what else is going to happen if people are not going to work, children are not going to school,
mhm,
you can't pay your rent, you can't purchase food, there's limited supplies in certain areas in particular. The transportation was a mess. And so here we are.
mhm. And we continue to see this same story reported. This time, it was Bloomberg. Want to get vaccinated in New York City? Try living on the Upper East Side. A third of Upper East Side residents are vaccinated against COVID 19, a tenth in parts of Harlem. And
And it's
so,
interesting. I'm
yeah,
sorry. It's
well, it's the same story we've been talking about. We've seen it in multiple publications, and Diana Ayala is quoted in this Bloomberg article. The fact that we knew where the hardest hit communities were and didn't set aside shots for them or prepare for that is just frustrating and mind-boggling. And so this is what our elected officials have to contend with, is that we have um, Mayor De Blasio and Governor Cuomo keep talking about the nation's most equitable distribution, and yet we see time after time and case after case that that's just not happening. And so it's just a dereliction of duty. There's really no excuse for this at this point in time. It's not rocket science. Send the vaccines to the place where the most people are affected.
Yeah, and it's interesting because being that we were just talking before the show that East Harlem is like what we call Project Row,
Hmm.
because all these projects lie right here on close to the either on the eastern border,
Mm-hmm.
extend over, but from 99th Street up to 124th Street. And so you have so many community centers. Every housing development has a community center, if not two, three, or four,
Mm-hmm.
depending on the size of the place. And so we're still looking for this mass back site, or a site where we can get a lot of people in, maybe from 8 to 8, as opposed to we'll settle for 8 to 8 because it doesn't look like we're going to see the mass vac site that the governor promised. It's unlikely that we're going to see that materialize.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting how little you know after the fact.
Uh-huh.
You opened your mouth, you said it was opening, now you got problems with contracts. You didn't know you had problems with contracts when you offered it up. You know, when I suggested the other area of La Maqueta, there's a problem with the contract. Oh,
Mm-hmm.
well, we don't want to use that area over there. You know, maybe because it's not, um, it's open, but it's getting warmer. The sun is setting later. So even if you did it till 5 o'clock and just put security outside,
Mm-hmm.
people would still be able to move. But no, so that's off the table for now. But the fact that we have these centers right here in East Harlem, like Johnson, like Chiano Towers, uh, Stanley Isaacs, and Holmes Tower is going to have a vaccination site for NYCHA.
Mm-hmm.
That's on 92nd Street and First Avenue. Why couldn't you extend that 6 blocks up in East Harlem
Mm-hmm.
with all of the opportune places? But no, it's going to open up down there with the vast majority of the projects being here. You
Mm-hmm.
open it down there. So it's just a continuous spitting in the face. It's like you're just spitting in our faces and saying, listen, we're going to do what we want. This is the way it is. And just deal with it.
So we got a couple of other stories, just kind of globally, what's going on that we want to talk about. Um, First is the problem with the AstraZeneca vaccine. And so Astra vaccine woes grow as regulators try to ease clot fears. So evidently, there are a number of places globally that are now basically shunning the AstraZeneca vaccine because there have been issues of people having clots and they're not dealing with it. And so you got places such as the Netherlands, Northern Ireland, Northern Italy, and Ireland who are suspending AstraZeneca shots over their concerns about these possible side effects. And of course, the company is saying it's perfectly safe and they're being
Well,
targeted, whatever. But I don't think places are just shutting down and turning back the vaccine for no problem, for no issues. Um, So this is not one of the ones that is available here in the U.S. We're still just dealing with the Pfizer, Moderna, and the Johnson and Johnson. But we just keep an eye on what's going on, and of course, AstraZeneca is one of the vaccines that are going to countries in Africa. So once again, we've got to ask these questions. What kind of resources are we getting?
I don't know. It's just so tiring,
Yes, it is.
you know. Um, it's like asking where does not come from my head after I banged into the wall 3 times, but I'm just not supposed to know it.
Mhm.
We just keep hitting these walls. Um,
Right.
We just keep hitting these people that keep saying those are good questions. Let's
Mhm.
take it.
Mhm.
Um, and so we had to submit another letter, but this time this letter comes from the assembly person and someone from the Department of Health who is going to those elected officials. So they actually pinned it. So it was like the first time there was something different as opposed to, well, we'll take it to them. We know our trusted partners, our trusted colleagues. We know they'll take it to them. But the problem with that is that they keep being shifted outside of the recovery effort.
Mhm.
So they're not even in the position to take anything there because they've been pulled out of the meetings. So they're trying to get information in by way of other people who are now put in place. So it just continues to be it's not even an uphill battle. It's like a battle that's just, you know, I beat you up today, you beat me up tomorrow. I beat you up today, you beat me up tomorrow. You know,
Mhm.
and but we're still in the same place because bottom line is we're both being beat up. So these are the city workers who are trained in these fields who are constantly being stripped of those positions and moved someplace else. And you can't think that it's not on purpose.
Mhm.
I mean, why'd you hire me for this position if now for really, even though we had the measles and we had Ebola, we had this, HN51 and we had these different things, but this is major. This is a pandemic. If this is what you hired me for, why is it that now we're in the middle of it and this is where we're trained to fight? You pull all of us out. You know, knowing those people are the connective tissue to the communities.
Mhm. Too many things that don't make sense in this whole thing. So we've also got some other news coming down the pike that is very pertinent to people who have immunocompromised systems. And I want to pull this article up. Um, so they've recently done a study that is recently published in the Journal of American Medical Association, basically saying that the vaccine is not as effective for people who have immunosuppressed patients. Um, so it's not saying that the death rate is higher, but it's definitely saying that the vaccine has not been as effective and they're not seeing the antibodies being formed in the way that it's happening to people who are not immunosuppressed. So they're recommending that people with immunocompromised systems not only need to get both shots if they're getting a two-shot vaccine, but they also probably should have their doctors check afterwards and test for antibodies to be sure that you are fully covered.
Absolutely. And that's why so many people are going to fall by the wayside because, you still have people that don't have medical doctors.
Hmm.
You have so many people that are forced to use the emergency rooms as medical facilities. When they get ill, they don't have any doctors to call. You have so many people that are undocumented, the immigrant community who, just the thought
Hmm.
of going to a medical facility, you have to tell someone something. Even for the free COVID test, you can't just go get the test without saying something
Hmm.
who you are. Now I know when I went to one site, they didn't ask me. I thought it was interesting. The first time they asked my address. When I went back the second time, they said, "No, we're not supposed to ask for your address." Because I said, "Why isn't my address in the site?" They couldn't pull up my record. They said, "Because we're not supposed to ask you for an address." I said, "The first time I came here, they not only asked me for an address, they asked me for a proof of address." and then they did something. They said, "There's the address." Okay, there's your address.
Hmm.
How did it get there unless somebody put it in there? So they're going to ask you something, and people are fearful. It was something suggested a long time ago that your community-based organizations that deal specifically with that community. You know, you got a lot of money to throw around. A lot of money was wasted. A lot of money on food being delivered and just sat down in lobbies that was supposed to be going to the homes of these people. Some cases, food was being delivered outside the building and left to rot in the sun, you know, or the animals and everything was picking over the food. So much money has been wasted. Now they're just getting to the point where they're starting to go into the homes, vaccinate people in the homes. Well, that's the same thing that you may have to figure out some kind of way where these community organizations can do the same thing when it comes to testing and vaccinations. Because the fact of the matter is, these people are not going to openly come out. So if you're looking for herd immunity, that's not going to happen. And they're the ones that's not getting tested and they're not getting vaccinated. Those
Hmm.
are the ones that's going to be your grocery store workers and your delivery people. you know, and even the people that's packing groceries in the store. Those are the ones that are right in people's faces on a regular basis that are not going to get either. So this is going to just continue for a while. And even those people, when now they're talking about those workers and taxi cab drivers and all that. When you go to these sites for vaccinations, you got to be able to prove that you're a taxi cab driver.
Hmm.
Prove where you work, what type of work that you do.
Hmm.
So unless they figure that out, it's not going to be getting any better anytime soon. You know, so yeah, we know, brother. We know that is systemic racism. We've been talking about that for the whole year. So we know that. But I mean, it's just not going to get better until you get down to the root of those people that were dying in
Hmm.
droves, those people that were being infected, households, entire households that were infected because nobody was going to go to the hospital.
So, the final story of the day. Today is St. Patrick's Day, and happy
Mm,
St. Patrick's Day because they're not having a super spreader event for the second year in a row. Then we're not having it, and that was probably the one decision that the state did at the beginning of this thing, which they did right, was to call it off last year and to call it off this year. Um, so there's that.
I'm sure somebody's got a mini parade going around the city.
Well, yeah, yeah, they're supposed to be doing some sort of virtual parade that they're streaming from in front of St. Patrick's Cathedral. But what we don't have is millions of people um, socially undistanced and drunk and going spreading it to every corner of the tri-state area. So happy St. Patrick's Day.
Yeah, and same to you. And
So I wish we had some upbeat news today, but we will continue to be here every Wednesday with the latest updates. We will continue to watch the story regarding evictions. We're going to watch the story regarding COVID recovery, and I think that's it for today.
happy Women's Month, ladies. in
Yes.
particular my sisters, who every day should be Black Women's Month. We've been at the forefront of everything forever. As
Right.
long as we've been here, we've been the
Mhm.
sustaining factors, the backbone of every movement,
Right.
from feeding families to, you got 10 kids in your family, you just
Hmm.
barely can figure out how to feed yours, but let a friend bring somebody home that's hungry. You're going to
Hmm.
figure out how to make a little more and a little more. Like I like to say, throw an extra cup of water, an extra cup of flour in there, throw in some fat, some
Hmm.
drippings, because you didn't have any meat, but you did save the drippings for when you had some.
Hmm.
A
Hmm.
little salt, a little pepper, and stretch it out.
Hmm.
So and certainly I've seen just tremendous, tremendous responses from um, our people during this pandemic. I always got to shout out the senior sisters.
Hmm.
And I'm talking about Latinx and African Americans. They were out there. They're still out there
Right.
pushing and you know a clear example of, well, I got a sandwich, but there's three people hungry, and we got to split that in four. Then we'll do that.
Right, right.
You know?
Well, definitely a shout out to all the people and certainly all the women who have kept food distribution in the forefront during this pandemic. What we've seen is utterly remarkable that even when things shut down, a whole army of community-based people stepped forward to make sure that people were able to eat even when they couldn't work and couldn't earn a living. um, and just it's that same core of people who saved democracy, made sure we got the vote out. I want to also say this is that we're coming up on a primary on June 22nd, where basically the winners of that primary will likely be the winners in the November election. So it's very, very important. There are a lot of key races when you talk about mayor, you're talking about the borough presidents, you're talking about district attorneys, city council people. There's going to be almost a complete overhaul of our city government. And it's really important that we start paying attention to these primaries now. There's also a new type of voting coming in called ranked choice, where when you vote, you not only pick the person you choose, you also pick your second and your third place candidates. And this is important because many of these races have multiple candidates, and they're not going to have runoffs the way they used to. The ranked choice is going to basically create the runoff and limit who gets to be in a runoff. So it's important that we not only learn what this means, but we need to look at these candidates because these are the people who are going to fix the problems going into 2022 and beyond. And I think we're all agreed that we need better than what we have now. We have a chance to choose better, but this is not about the fall election. This is about looking at who's running in the spring so that we can make a decision on June 22nd or beforehand if you do early voting.
Yeah, and from here on out, that's what you need to do. If you weren't voting before, from here on out, because no matter where this goes, we're in this for a long time.
Hmm.
We're gonna be in this for a long time. The repercussions of this pandemic,
Hmm.
are not going away. And again, we can't stress it enough. Please stop with the groups. We're already seeing people in the park this weekend. It was
Hmm.
nice. We already seen droves of people in the park on top of each other.
Hmm.
And it hasn't even gotten warm yet. Please, that's where the spread is. The
Hmm.
families, the groups, the getting together for the reveal parties. People are going to start having graduation parties. Oh, I thought something was very interesting, Bob. I don't know if you saw the article where, speaking about graduation, Columbia University is going to have 5 or 6 different graduations.
Really? Wow.
According to class, people who are poorer, they're gonna have one graduation, and and the LGBT, they're calling that the purple, the purple ceremony or something like that, and I'm like, are you serious? Are you serious? So like it never stops.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And meanwhile, down in Florida, they're bracing for what else? Florida spring break. Because why let a pandemic stop you from spring break?
It is absolutely incredible
Mm-hmm.
how we can be remembered at the wrong times. You remember black people when it comes time to you get the poor graduation. All the poor people, you graduate together.
Mm-hmm.
That thing is they're going to be virtual, so
Mm-hmm.
it's not even like you're all going to be in the same place. But I'm like, so why is it broken up like that, as opposed to um alphabetically? So the first one, we have tens of thousands of people graduating. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
so the first graduation, we're going to do that from A to F.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody from A to F, or different schools. Even if you did it by schools, it'd be too many people. You'd have to break it down. But that is just atrocious.
Mm-hmm. So I think that's it for us for this morning. We ask people to continue to share this information, spread it. Let's all use common sense and be responsible. Let's not let warm weather fool us. This thing is still going on in our communities, and protect ourselves and protect each other.
Yes, and let's not let the antibodies fool us. I'm just excuse me. I'm just amazed at how much I'm hearing now about antibodies.
Hmm.
People saying I can go to this gathering for Memorial Day because I have the antibodies. I'm like, what? What are you talking about? Antibodies? I'm not getting vaccinated because I got the antibodies. They say reading is fundamental,
Hmm.
and you got to get some informed decision. Again, we will never tell you to take it or not take it. That is not our position. But we will tell you to get some informed information, and that needs to be some medically based information.
Right. So we'll be here next week, God willing, 9:30 on YouTube and Facebook. This is Bob Ponce and Carol Johnson for Harlem Emergency Network.
Stay safe. Have a great week.